So to kick it off, we're going to start with tracking and billing, tracking billable and non-billable activities on Locus. You can bill your clients on hourly basis, flat fee basis as well. You can also manage your expenses for clients directly on Locus. There are two different types of activities when it comes to the Locus system. As I said, there's billable and non-billable. Billable just means that you have the ability to charge your client on a flat fee basis or time entry basis and add that to your invoice. For non-billable, it's going to come in when you want to just be able to show on the invoice the work that you've done, but not charge the client for that specific thing. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what that looks like, and we'll be able to walk through that together. Okay, so once you're inside of the Locus system and you have a particular matter that you're billing for, one of the first things that you can do is go to the matter, and then once you're inside of the matter, you have the ability to add a actually, let me do a different person. Okay, so you have the ability to have both billable and non-billable time entries. And as you see here, there's some entries that are inputted that has the billable type, and there's also an entry that has a non-billable type. To be able to do this, all you would need to do once you're inside of the matter and you're under time is go to add time, and you would just add in the information for that particular time entry. And once you have the information in here, you then have the ability to tag it. If it's non-billable, you can just tag it as non-billable and then go ahead and save that entry. If it were an entry that was going to be billable, you would just do the same thing and just do add and then put in that information here and make sure that you put in whatever you've worked on, and then you would just save it as a regular entry. And then you can see both of the options right here where there's a billable and then a non-billable. To take it a step further, you also have the option to add it by using the plus sign up here. And by hitting the plus sign, you can go ahead and add a time entry from anywhere within the Locus system. And you would just put in the same information here, whether it was billable or non-billable. You'd make sure that you add in that information. Now, one thing that you will see that's different is that the rate that's here is different than the rate that was on the invoice for that particular matter. And that is something that you can do for your firm within your settings. To be able to set this up, you want to make sure that as a firm, inside of your settings, you have your information here where you ensure that the give me a second here, sorry. You want to ensure that from a firm standpoint, when it comes to the information that you have for the sorry. Okay, sorry about that. The information that you have for the rates are inputted here. So if it's going to be like a custom rate, you would go ahead and add in a custom rate here, and it's under settings and then bill settings, and then you'll come here and then you'll do add, and then you'll add a name for what you would want this to be in terms of like a template. So I already had one here for probate. For us to add one together, I'm just going to create a family law one. And then you have the ability to add the custom right here. And then you can make it for everyone within the firm by just hitting everyone and then adding in the rate. So if I wanted to have in, let's say 350 for family law cases, I have the ability to add that here and then hitting save. This will allow you to, when you're doing invoices, to ensure that the the rate is applicable to the practice area that you're working on. Another thing that you want to also make sure while we're in settings here is you're going to want to make sure that from a practice area standpoint, you add in the firm rate up here. So if the firm rate were different than 500, you would add in that hourly rate here. And then you would also want to make sure that you add in your target billings for the year and the work days also in this information here. So you're going to want to make sure all of these things are filled in just to ensure that when you're actually working on an invoice or working for a case in a specific matter, that this hourly rate is already plugged in. Now, if it was a custom rate for a specific matter, what you would want to do to be able to have a custom rate for a specific matter is go into that matter and then go to the pencil up here at the top. And then you have the ability to come into here. And if the firm rate were not $500, I apologize. If for this case, you didn't want to charge $500, you wanted to charge something less than that, you have the ability to come into here and do a custom rate. And you can add the custom rate here. Now you can have a custom rate be for everyone within the firm, or if there's specific people within the firm that you want to have a specific rate within for that specific user type, you would then come into here and just add either the team members information and then plug in the rate, or if it's for the entire firm, you would do everyone and then plug in that information. Now, I know you saw that I showed you the different templates that were inside of the settings, and that's something that you can actually apply here as well by hitting use template, and then you can add in and apply the rate. Now you see here that the practice area appears probate. So I can go ahead and just hit apply. And now once I've hit apply, you'll see that the rates for the team members automatically populate here for us. And this is done again by being inside of settings and just ensuring that you're adding that information into the bill settings area. So again, just go to settings and then bill settings, and then you want to make sure that you add it here under custom hourly rates. All right. So going back into the presentation. This was something that I just went ahead and covered, being able to show you the billable hours. One thing that I also want to make sure that I cover as well is the expenses. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. So when you're in here, if you have a matter that you want to add an expense to, all you would need to do is go to the expenses tab, and then you would hit add. And if you have like an invoice or something like that for a specific expense that you've covered for a particular matter, you would go ahead and add in that information here by just dragging it into the space down here. Now, if it were, and then it would bring up this window, and then you would just plug in whatever attachment you wanted to for that matter. One thing you want to make sure that you do as well is that if it's something that you don't want to bill the client for, you do have the option here to add it as non-billable, and that will make sure that the information just shows up on the invoice, but instead of actually moving forward and billing the client for it, it's just going to show up as non-billable. And as you see here, this was an expense that was already plugged in by one of the users, and it shows that it was billable, and the amount is also here. And you can see that it wasn't invoiced yet, but the information is here as to what exactly the person worked on that they needed to apply the expense for. So you also have the ability to add expenses by hitting the plus sign and then going to add expense. And then this will give you the ability to add the expense for any matter. Whether it's for the one that we were just in or another one, all you would need to do is just click on add matter here and then select the matter that you want to add it to, and make sure that you add in the rate and you add in the description of what that information is. Now, when you add in non-billable, it brings up this window or this pop-up that allows you to instead choose whether you want to display on the invoice or not. And so by checking it, it's going to make sure that it shows up on the invoice. Another thing is that you also have the ability to add in expenses for other users if you have permissions to do that within the Locus system. And you can choose whoever you want to be the person that gets assigned to this expense or any expense that you're working on. All right. So when it comes to custom rates for users and matters, this was something that I did spend a little bit of time on, and you do have the ability to add it for each user, and it can be customized for different types of matters. You also have the ability to have it be for everyone, and you do have the ability to add the custom hourly rate templates, which I did just show you just now. Now we're going to go ahead and cover how to generate an invoice inside of Locus. But before I actually have us work on generating an invoice, I just want to cover a couple of things that you want to make sure that you have set up already in order to ensure that your invoice is set up properly. The first thing that you're going to want to do is make sure that you're in settings, and you want to make sure that you have your information inside of the bill settings for the invoice templates. Now here you'll see that I already have a template created for a law office. But we can actually, if you want to create a new one, you would just hit add template, and you would come into here, and if there was a particular color that you wanted to have for your firm, you would go ahead and select the color. If you have custom colors, you do have the option to add hex codes here, and this will allow you to add in the different color that you want for your particular business or brand. You then want to make sure that you choose the kind of invoice theme that you want to go with. There's 3 different options that you can choose from, and it really just changes the flow of what it looks like. Some important things to make sure that you pay attention to is the currency. If you're working with different people in different areas that work with different currencies, you're going to want to make sure that this is check to the proper currency that you're working with. And the beauty of having multiple templates is you have the ability to have multiple currency types depending on the template. So this one is the United States one. We're going to leave it as that. But if you wanted to have another one, you would just go ahead and select it. And then when you're naming your template up here, you would just make sure that you insert the name of the country somewhere in there so that you're able to differentiate it when you're working on the invoice. Another thing that you want to make sure that you have is the default due date. This is something that comes in very handy when you're working on sending out an invoice, because it will automatically show up when the invoice is due. And another thing as well is when you're working on sending out invoice reminders, if this information is inputted properly with the number of days when it's due, that will then better set up the invoice reminders and how they're sent out. We'll cover invoice reminders in a bit later on. Some other things to make sure that you pay attention to is the bill to information. You want to make sure that all of this, if you want to have it on the invoice or not, you check it off. So if you want to have the matter label on there or not, you have the option to take it off, and you'll see that it goes away up here. And if you didn't want to have the issue date or any of this other stuff, you would just go ahead and select whether you want to check it on or off. That's going to be entirely up to you. Important to pay attention to, though, is going to be the company information. You want to make sure that you have your company logo in here if you have one. And if there's any information here that you don't want on the invoice, you'd make sure that you check it off so that it doesn't show up. If you're not a firm that works with flat fees and you want to take that off the invoice, you do have the ability to do that. And you would just select whichever options you want in terms of what you don't want to have on there. So if we took flat fees off, you'll see automatically that that whole entire section just then disappears and it's no longer visible on the invoice. Same thing is going to be for time entries and expenses. If you're a firm that only works with flat fees, you're going to want to make sure that you keep time entries off if you don't really use them. Expenses, the same thing. Other info, this would just be like the subtotal, and it will also be any discounts. So if you are not don't really typically give out discounts, you can definitely take that off the invoice, and you can also ensure that you have terms on there. So you have the ability to show the terms or not to show the terms. And speaking of terms, when it comes to them, you have the option to add them in as a default here in the template as well. So if you have particular terms and conditions that you offer, you want to make, or that not that you offer, but that you want to ensure that you communicate to your clients, you're going to add in that information here and any notes. So if you want us to say thank you for your business or anything like that, you have the option to add that here. If you don't want your invoice to show any outstanding invoices that are past due, you do have the option to take it off and it will no longer show up. And the same thing for the trust balance. If you're not a firm that typically uses trust accounts and have trust balances or work with retainers. When it comes to the credit balance, the same thing. If you don't really utilize retainers or take trust payments, and you don't want this on here, you do have the option to take that off as well. When it comes to the payment summary, that's something that typically every invoice should have, but if you don't want to have it, you can take it off. And last but not least, the trust request. This information here, if it's not necessary and you don't need it, you can take this off. So the beautiful thing about these templates is that you can really just customize it as much as you possibly want to. And in addition to that, you can have as many as you want and just name them differently. And here, it's important to note that you do have the option to set up an invoice template as a default, so that one, if you're going to be using it on a consistent basis, you have the option to check it on or off here. In order to make sure that the information shows up properly when it comes to the name of the firm and all this information, when you're inside of your settings, you do have the ability to make sure that that information shows up properly under firm settings and company info. And here, the company logo was inserted and the address and all of this. In order for the invoice to actually save, you have to make sure that you have a logo, the business name, the address, and the business phone number. These things are essential. If it's not on there, the invoice will not save to any of the matters and you won't be able to